What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp Podcast. I am here with Tim.
Your host with the most.
And today is our trade deadline wrap-up. And we wanted to take a couple days just to kind of let the different trades seek in, kind of see the way that they shake out, see if any extra details came out.
Shake and bake, baby. Shake and bake,
Yeah, so we're going to start, I guess we'll start with the first trade that I considered like a trade deadline trade, which was the trade between the Islanders and the Devils. So let me pull up the details here, just so I know I get everything right. Every trade after that, I'm considering like a trade deadline acquisition.
Which is fair. Anything before was kind of early.
So this trade was, if I can find it. It was Devin Dubnyk trade. Nope. Okay, here it is. It was a 2021 first and a conditional 2022 fourth, which the condition is if the Islanders advance to the Stanley Cup final, the fourth becomes a third in either 2022 or 2023. And AJ Greer and Mason Jobst, who are two essentially career minor leaguers for the New York Islanders. I think one was 24, one was 26 years old. For Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, each one of which had 50% retained salary. So,
which I think is actually probably the most nuts part about that, because if the Devils seemed like they were trying to rebuild off of this, to retain half their salary is kind of tough, because you did give away, honestly, two solid players.
Yeah, I mean, both of their contracts are up at the end of the season, so it's not like they're going to be carrying that salary over into next season. And this was kind of, so the funny part is after all this kind of transpired, we heard the rumors that the Islanders were in on Taylor Hall and that he was willing to waive his no trade clause to come here. But the Devils at the last minute threw in Travis Zajac. So the trade originally did not contain Travis Zajac, and then they put him in to put the Islanders over the edge and get them to complete this trade.
And I think this is better than if they got Taylor Hall, because Travis Zajac adding that centerpiece, I think, is huge. It's third line center depth, or even if they throw him on the fourth. Is he playing on the third or the fourth line?
Well, he's not going to play on the fourth line. The fourth line's always going to be Martin Ziegler, Clutterbuck. So he's been playing on the third line with. Last game he played with Bailey and
it's also
Wahlstrom.
Huge that they traded to the Devils,
or Peugeot, sorry,
because
Bailey
that meant that there was no wait period for all the COVID restrictions, because it's in the metropolitan area, which is huge. Also, that means it's an instant impact, and they're really playing for that President's Trophy against the Capitals right now. So it's a really interesting one right there.
Yeah, they literally drove from New Jersey. They had practice, and then the game after they were playing. They played against I think their first game was against the Flyers, and then they played against the Rangers. So, obviously Kyle Palmieri more or less is the replacement for Anders Lee, which, he brings a little bit of a different skill set. He's not so much the net front guy. He's more of a one-timer from the circles kind of guy.
Rolling out from the corners.
Yeah. And then Zajac, I think, is a really big piece of this trade, because he allows us to not have to play either Ross Johnston, Leo Komarov, or Kiefer Bellows if Trotz doesn't want to. And Zajac is a solid third-line center. I mean, he's one of the better third-line centers in the league, honestly. Like, super underrated. He's been underrated for his entire time on the New Jersey Devils. So, I think this is a great trade for both teams. I mean,
I think it was a little rough for the Devils, like I said, retaining half their salaries. It's not like they had killer salaries, but in a portion where you're clearly looking to rebuild. But they did get the first for 2021, which is big, and the conditional fourth for next year, which probably will honestly wind up being a fourth round. So it's still a big trade for the Devils, but I think it was definitely a win for the Islanders.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a win for the Islanders, because let's be real here. I mean, we don't need that first round pick this year. Most of our young talent is playing on the team. Like, Oliver Wahlstrom is only 20 years old. Kiefer Bellows is only 21 years old. Anthony Beauvillier is still young. Matt Barzell is still young. We have a lot of young talent. Like Noah Dobson's only 20 years old. So, we don't necessarily need a lot of young talent. And the Islanders are in a mode where, they should be winning now. This is their time to compete. The window is open. So, the first is negligible just because it's most likely going to end up, they haven't clinched the playoffs yet, so jinx, knock on wood, but it's most likely going to end up in the 16 to 32 range. And in a year where we don't necessarily know how the prospects are going to shake out because some of them haven't been playing because of COVID, some of their leagues weren't running.
I think that almost makes it better though that if they're going to have a late round pick in this case, because
you could get a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really know where that talent is going in the first round because there's it's not just big names going.
Yeah, the two players going back to the Devils are kind of negligible. They're just career minor leaguers. They really haven't made an impact in the AHL either way. I think this trade makes a lot of sense for the Islanders, and when we look at some of the value that other teams got back, specifically, we can compare this. We can jump right into the next biggest trade that happened. Well, not the next biggest, but we'll jump into probably the number one trade everyone's thinking about, the Taylor Hall trade. When you consider that Taylor Hall was traded for a second and Anders Bjork, getting a first and a fourth for Palmieri and Zajac is really honestly not bad value, all things considered. So I think this is a trade that makes sense for both teams. I really like the way it's worked out for everyone. I think that this is a great trade for the Islanders because they are trying to win now. I think this is a good trade for the Devils because they were likely going to lose Palmieri and Zajac, or maybe not Zajac. Zajac might have re-signed, but they were likely going to lose Palmieri in unrestricted free agency. So
Zajac's also old though. He's
35, I think.
Yeah, so honestly, I could see him giving 2 more years and just being done.
And the Islanders have said that they're open to re-signing both players, which I would be open to re-signing both. I think if we can get Komarov's contract off the team, maybe if we can pay the Seattle Kraken to take on his contract, we can take that $3 million and give $1 million of it to Travis Zajac as an incentive to say hey, if you want to try winning a cup, just stay here with us. Palmieri is another question. I don't know if we'll be able to keep him just because the top 6 is kind of loaded up right now because
what is he at?
His previous contract was a 5.5.
Yeah, I think it's 5.5, something around that. I don't really know. He's gonna probably want that 5.5, 6 still. I'm not sure he's worth it when there are other players you could maybe get for 5 to 6.
I just think also his role on the Islanders
is very time oriented
because Lee is hurt, right? So next year if the Islanders going with Barzal, Lee, Eberle is the first line, and then the second line is Nelson, Beauvillier, Wahlstrom. You could bump Bo down to the third line, but then you also have to fit Bailey in somewhere. You still have to fit Pajot in somewhere. So he doesn't. I wouldn't be opposed to upgrading, just straight up trading away Josh Bailey because as much as I love Josh Bailey and as much as I love his loyalty to the team, Palmieri is an upgrade over Josh Bailey. There's no question about that. I love Josh Bailey, I love everything he does, but Palmieri is an offensive upgrade. I won't say defensive upgrade, but offensive upgrade, which is specifically something a team really needs. I just don't know that A, they're going to be willing to trade Josh Bailey, and B, honestly, if he's not playing in the top 6, I don't think he'd want to stay here. So I think his future on the Islanders is mostly just going to be the rental thing. But I could see us keeping Zajac if we can get rid of Leo Komarov's contract in the offseason. So I think this is a good trade for both teams. But, especially when we look at, we'll jump into the next trade, the big one, the Taylor Hall trade. So a little bit of backstory to this trade. Taylor Hall has a full no trade clause, and he would not waive his no trade clause to basically any team besides, the rumor was that he would waive it to come to the New York Islanders before the Devils threw in Travis Zajac and the Bruins. So if you're wondering why the return on Taylor Hall seems so low, A, because he sucks. He sucked this year. There's no bones about it. Yes, he was playing on the Sabres, but bottom line, 2 goals is just not good enough. And he was playing with Jack Eichel, who Jack Eichel was struggling to put the goals in himself, but Jack Eichel was putting up assists left, right, and center. Like, he was like a pointer game at one point on assists alone. So clearly Taylor Hall wasn't scoring the goals that he was getting all these assists to. Most of it was going to Sam Reinhart. But, I mean, Taylor Hall just, A, wasn't playing good enough this year, and B, he handcuffed the Buffalo Sabres into trading with the Bruins, and the Bruins probably knew this. So the trade breaks down to Curtis Lazar and Taylor Hall go to the Boston Bruins for Anders Bjork and a 2021 second-round pick. So the Sabres don't even get a first out of it. They do get Anders Bjork, who is a nice little piece. He's not that old. I believe he's only like 24 years old. I mean, it's funny because I was saying that Taylor Hall would get lowballed by a lot of teams because they know that the Sabres are in a bad spot. I said that a first and a prospect instead of like the 2 firsts that everyone was thinking, and they didn't even get a first out of it.
I think that also came down to the fact that Taylor Hall handcuffs them to the
Absolutely.
Like, so they knew, like, yo, you're either gonna get us or you're gonna get nothing. And having Taylor Hall on the team this season is, with Jack Eichel now knowing that he's out for the rest of the season, would just be such a waste because
you don't get anything out of it.
And, like, honestly, let's say Taylor Hall winds up turning around his season and he starts playing well and he wins a couple games for them. That only hurts them in this fucking tanking season that they're having.
Yeah, and he wasn't going to sign in Buffalo. I don't care what he says. I don't care that he went on record and said, I'd love to be a Sabre for years. He's full of crap.
That's the JT fucking method right there.
Listen, my respect for Taylor Hall as a hockey player this season has plummeted. I went into the year with a lot of high hopes for the Sabres team. For him to come and lay a total egg on the ice and do basically nothing, you know. And like I said, sure, Jack Eichel was struggling, but he was putting up a lot of assists. Where were those assists going? Not to Taylor Hall. He wasn't putting the puck in the net. So for him to come on, lay a total egg on the ice on the Buffalo Sabres, do absolutely nothing of value for the team, then handcuff them and not open his options. And I get it. Listen, when you sign a no-move clause, you're entitled to use that no-move clause. I totally understand that. But for him to be like, well, either you send me to this team, or I'm just going to wait until free agency, that tells me a lot about him. That tells me a lot that he's not a team player. He's not a team-oriented person. He's a very, very selfish person. He's a very selfish player. Quite honestly, I'm very glad the Islanders didn't pick him up after this whole thing because he wouldn't fit in on the Islanders system because it's a team system. And I honestly don't think he's that great of a fit for the Bruins either. I mean, he's not going to play on the first line. You're not breaking up the perfection line of Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak. So he's probably going to play on the second line with Krejci and Craig Smith, which they need depth scoring on the Bruins. They absolutely do. But he just doesn't play the way that this Bruins team plays, I don't think. You know, really the skill line of the top line is like where all the nice goals come from.
I think the problem is that he won't fit the depth that he'll fit into on the Bruins, like you're saying. Because I think he fits that same wheel and deal, one-man team type of objective that a lot of the superstars like Marchand and Pasta play with on that team. So I think the issue is you don't need 3 lines of that. You need a third line unless you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course. But you need a line to get in there, grind a little bit, get in those corners, and maybe get a few dirty goals, and also play maybe some counter, like some matchup minutes against maybe their second or top line. And I'm just not sure that he fits that, and that's kind of why he lost his job in Edmonton also.
Well, yeah, because all the younger players that came after him just started to be better than him. But it's a good trade for the Bruins in the sense that they desperately, desperately needed depth scoring because when that first line didn't score, they lost games all the time. And I think that this provides a little bit of nice depth on the wing. My problem is when you look at the guys that like David Krejci has excelled with in the past, none of them really played like Taylor Hall. Like David Krejci played with guys like Milan Lucic and Nathan Horton, you know, big, strong power forwards, and that's why he's playing with Craig Smith. And Taylor Hall, if Taylor Hall was playing with Marchand and Pasternak, like if one of them was a center, I think that's a fantastic line because they're very high-flying, high-skilled players. But I just don't know that he fits the mold with David Krejci. And quite honestly, his first couple of games in Boston, he looked like crap. Like,
yikes. I don't disagree with you.
He just looked like he doesn't care. And it's like you got what you wanted. You handcuffed the Buffalo Sabres. You screwed them basically out of a first-round pick. Because let's be honest here. If Taylor Hall was playing better, if he was on pace for like 20 to 30 goals, the Bruins probably would have still given him the first-round pick, even knowing that they had him handcuffed. They probably still would have given up that first-round pick.
Because they would have known that they might have needed to. Otherwise, someone else might have swept in.
Yeah. But to come in, score 2 goals, handcuff the Sabres, and then go to the Bruins and look like absolute garbage, like totally invisible on the ice. Like, I really...
Go fuck yourself, buddy.
I seriously, like, I genuinely hope in this offseason that he's the highest bidder is like $5 million, which he doesn't even deserve that, to be honest with you. Like, right now, if I paid Taylor Hall for his production this season, I'd be giving him like $3 million. But we all know in the offseason, some team's going to pay him $8 million. And I genuinely hope that the New York Islanders stay as far away from this guy as possible. I want nothing to do with him. I guess technically, if we had to assign a winner, I guess technically the Bruins get what they needed for like a fraction of the cost. But do they really? Like, I don't know. I think the Sabres did the best that they could with a very, very bad situation. Like, getting a second and a 24-year-old winger whose Anders Bjork's honestly been kind of underrated because he's been stuck behind a lot of the other players on the Bruins.
I don't think it was bad for Buffalo, but they just could have got more. But I think that's kind of all there's really to say with that.
Taylor Hall is a joke, and I'm, like, kind of done considering him, like, this big winger. I do want to talk about the Anthony Mantha trade because I think this one's really interesting. So the Washington Capitals, and this just makes the Sabres trade look even worse, honestly. Like, the Washington Capitals trade for forward Anthony Mantha, and the Detroit Red Wings get Richard Panik, Jacob Vrana, a first and a second for Anthony Mantha.
Imagine looking your GM in the face after that as the owner, if you're Buffalo, and just like...
You're just being like... I don't.
What happened, guys?
So this is like an interesting trade. I like Anthony Mantha as a player. Like, he's having a down year, right? Then again, it's kind of hard to judge because unlike the Sabres, whose offense should have been good with Taylor Hall, nobody expects the Red Wings' offense to be good. No one expects the Red Wings to be good in any facet of the game, right? It is a very interesting trade to me because I genuinely think the Detroit Red Wings got like a really good value out of Anthony Mantha on this.
Ridiculous to get, cause like, let's be fair, those picks are probably going to be anywhere from 20 to 30, 31,
like the 16 to 32 range. Yeah, because the Capitals are going to make
I would say they're
playoffs.
probably even more like 20, or 24, because they'll probably get out of the first round.
We always say that about the Caps, right?
But okay, so like assuming it's at least
yeah,
16
on paper they should be getting at least to the second round.
Yeah, so like they're around 24 to 31 range on picks for the next 2 years. So it's not that great, but
I think Jacob Vrana is really what like seals the deal on this to me.
Jacob Vrana is solid. That's a solid pick.
He's not that old too either, I don't think. Let's see if I pull up Jacob Vrana's profile here. Jacob Vrana is he's only 25. I mean, that's kind of old for the Detroit Red Wings like age profile, but
no, that's perfect though. He's got a little age to him.
Like he's a veteran on that team. Like he really would be considered a veteran, right?
He's like Chris Kreider on the Rangers right now.
Yeah, and Richard Panik is kind of just a throw in to me. He'll probably Richard Panik will probably be moved in this offseason or he'll be like a trade deadline acquisition next year for a team. But I just think like Vrana, a first and a second for Anthony Mantha is a solid return. It sucks because I remember when Anthony Mantha was like the big thing in Detroit, right? Like the super young power forward.
It's upsetting to see Detroit lose one of its like good young players, but for the value of it, for the franchise and the value, especially as like an old Red Wings fan, I like to see this is like where they're going because it shows that they're actually trying to get back to the old era of Detroit.
Well,
And they're not just trying to hop and skip there like the Rangers did and might have fumbled.
what do you think about this? Like, what does this do for the Capitals, do you think? Because I'll tell you what, Anthony Mantha already in his first game with the Caps looks like leagues better than Taylor Hall did with the Bruins.
I think that because that's a veteran core, that's a vet core right there on the Capitals. Even their bottom line guys are haggling. Like
it's like Hagelin, Garnet Hathaway, and don't remember the other guy's name, but
that's what I'm saying though. Like so, you're looking at, and it's not necessarily old veterans. Besides maybe like Chara and Ovi's a little
Ovi's
old.
like 34. You know,
Yeah, Ovi's getting up there, but like not really.
Backstrom's like mid 30s.
A little older. But
I think John Carlson's like just hit 30.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you have guys in like their prime of their career on a team that could be making cup runs for the next 3 years. That Mantha pick is huge because if he develops in these next 3 years like he should,
like he's only 26, yeah. So
that's what I'm saying. He should just mesh right in because he's old enough that. Yeah, I think he should really just mesh right in with that team, as we've seen from the past few games, and on another President's Trophy run for the Capitals, every little bit counts.
I think what this does for the Caps is it gives them a little bit of balance in the top six because the first line that they've been using has been Backstrom, Oshie, and Ovechkin. And then Wilson's been playing on the second line. So I think what this does for them is it allows them to maybe shuffle some guys around. Like if you wanted to, you could either load up like a big line and put Mantha and Wilson out there together. Or you could shuffle around the lines. You could put, because your second line could be Kuznetsov, Wilson, Mantha, right? Or you could put Wilson up to the first line or Mantha up to the first line. You get a big body on the first line. And I think that's actually something that maybe this is what they were thinking, where to a certain extent, kind of like the Anders Lee to the Matt Barzal, where Matt Barzal can dump the puck in the corner and just be like, here, like go get it. And Anders Lee, like all 240 pounds of him, just like lumbers into the corner and like wins the puck battle. Because Ovi can win puck battles, but you don't want him in the corner because he can't score from there. Well, he can, but like he's not going to be scoring from there very often.
It's not his wheelhouse. You want him in his wheelhouse.
Right, so you can like Backstrom can throw the puck in the corner and be like, here, Mantha, like go get the puck. Like Mantha can lumber into the corner, win the puck battle, and get it to Oshie or get it to Ovechkin in the circles, right? I just think this gives their top six a nice big body option on both lines and not just one. Because let's say, for argument's sake, they split the two of them up. Then you have a Backstrom, Ovechkin, Wilson line, and then you have Kuznetsov, Oshie, and Mantha. So you have a big body on both lines. And I really like what this brings for the Washington Capitals. They get a little bit bigger, and one of the knock on the Capitals for a long time was that they were soft. They would always get bullied by the Rangers in the playoffs, right? So this gives them a little bit of size, a little bit of snarl, a little bit of bite up front. It gives them balance in the top six, and I think this is a really good trade for them. They definitely paid a pretty penny, but like you said, their thinking is they're probably saying, well, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup, so that first round pick should be pick number 31, or technically 32, because I don't remember if the Kraken are in this draft or not. I have to look that up, but 31 or 32, right? So I think this trade works out for both teams, but I think that the Detroit Red Wings definitely got a pretty penny for Anthony Mantha, all things considered. So let's just scroll down. We'll see what else we got.
I actually like that. If you scroll up, I like that. Not up more. I like that Chicago trade with Brett Connolly.
Chicago made a couple of trades.
That Lucas Walmart. I think that's a good one.
Chicago actually, they made a couple of trades. They bought some players. They also gave away some players. They traded away Matthias Janmark. But so this trade is Chicago gets Brett Connolly, Henrik Borgstrom, Riley Stillman, and a seventh for Lucas Wallmark and Lucas Carlson to the Florida Panthers. I think this is an interesting trade for Chicago just because this is not like them buying into a rental. But this is them like saying to the team, like, hey, like if you make the playoffs, here's a little bit of help, Like,
I think Brett Connolly is a good piece.
I think he's a good like third line scoring winger,
I think that's a good addition to them, especially because if they want to run, because I think the issue with Chicago's right now is depth and defense. So if they want to run those two first lines with scoring and the kids. They could even throw back Brett Connolly on the second line. Throw him out there. Let him get some net front time. Let him get in the corners. Maybe wheel it out.
I definitely think it's interesting because, like I said, it indicates to me that this to me is kind of like a reward trade, right? This to me is the GM like rewarding his players for being as competitive as they have been this year. And he's like, listen, like I'm not gonna sell the family farm. Because realistically speaking, we don't necessarily have the chops to win the Stanley Cup this year, but we need to trade Lucas Wallmark. The Florida Panthers want to try to trade him away. So like, let's just get something out of it. We'll get a little bit of help, and we get a 7th round pick out of it, and we'll see what happens.
I think they're in a very transitional year, kind of like the Rangers were last year, and I think also a big thing that's handcuffing them right now is not knowing what is going on with JT.
Yeah, we haven't heard any new update about him since it was reported that he wasn't going to play the entire year. We haven't heard like basically anything.
We probably won't get an update until we know whether he's coming back or if he's never coming back. But they obviously know more information, so I'm just really interested to see where that takes them because if he comes back, they really do have another wild card, loose cannon competing team if they piece it together like the Rangers did do this year, kind of, as we're seeing. Even though the Rangers on paper shouldn't be better. I'm gonna take that back. It's a really high flying loose team this year.
We have seen Kirby Dach, like he has come back, and obviously Kirby Dach is the center of the future for them. Like he is the next generational Jonathan Toews. He's that big, heavy first line center, and it's good to see him back on the ice. And I think that realistically speaking, if Jonathan Toews did come back and played next year, they honestly might just play him on the second line at this point.
They might put him with Kaner now.
Either that or like just leave Kane with Dach because Kane, Dach, and DeBrincat was lighting it up last year. Like that line was nasty.
The problem being is that Kane usually plays on the second line. So
yeah,
and I wouldn't even mind seeing I wouldn't mind seeing JT on maybe the first line with two other wingers, whoever they decide, and then just put Dach and Kane on the second line.
Dach, Kane, and DeBrincat,
yeah.
Like get them back together.
Yeah, like you could fill the second line with that and put JT on the first line and just let him like Crosby it out. Essentially, he has that playmaking ability that he can play with kind of anyone and put up some points.
Yeah, and he would be a really good tutor for Pius Suter, who's been playing really well this year. He's actually been playing on their first line, but I mean, all things considered, like I think this is a win for the Chicago Blackhawks. Not that the Florida Panthers got fleeced or anything, because they got a depth winger out of it, which is what they needed. But I think that this is a nice little like nod from the GM to be like, well, we're gonna get a pick out of it. We're gonna get rid of a player that we need to trade away, but like we're gonna, you know what? Here's a little something, something. Like if you make the playoffs, like he's gonna help you out. I do want to stay on the Florida Panthers because I do want to talk about the trade with the Buffalo Sabres because this is essentially their replace Aaron Ekblad trade. So Brandon Montour from the Buffalo Sabres goes to the Florida Panthers for a third, which I think, first of all, a third for Brandon Montour is great value for the Buffalo Sabres. I think they got a nice piece out of that. Like, honestly, given the surroundings of the Buffalo Sabres, like I was expecting them to get a fourth out of him. So to get a third, a third round pick, I think is great. Not saying the Panthers got fleeced, but I think that's good value for Brandon Montour. And Brandon Montour, I think he's the kind of defenseman that they need because you're not replacing Aaron Ekblad. Like you don't, right? Like unless you're trading for like John Klingberg, like you're not replacing the kind of player that Aaron Ekblad is. But you get a nice defensive piece, a nice stay-at-home defenseman. I'm curious your thoughts on, do you like the defensive defenseman pick, or do you think that they maybe should have leaned a little bit more into the offense and gotten an offensive defenseman?
I think they should have went for an offensive defenseman. Florida is playing Ranger-style hockey right now, in my opinion, or 2015 Ranger-style hockey where they're really... actually, let me phrase that. They are playing Chicago Blackhawks hockey, where it's high-flying and let the goaltender make all the saves. Push him to the outside with your defenseman, let the goaltender make it 25, 30 saves a night, even if, just make them low percentage saves. So I would have rather seen an offensive defenseman pick up. I would have rather seen them go for...
I was going to ask you, do you think they maybe should have tried to go for Hayden Fleury from Carolina?
Yeah. I think they should have went for... Who are the other... There were a few people who didn't wind up going as defensemen.
I mean, if they really wanted to swing for the fences, they might have tried to, just pry, Drew Doughty out of LA, but, then you're stuck with his contract is the issue. They could have honestly maybe went to the Toronto Maple Leafs and asked them for, I would say TJ Brody, because you're not getting Morgan Riley, but TJ Brody's a nice offensive piece, or even, not Zach Hyman because he's the forward. I'm gonna pull up their roster so I know who I'm talking about here. I can see his face. He's a younger guy on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's see. I almost said Neil Pionk, but he's on the Winnipeg Jets.
But I don't think it was a bad pick, though. I just think that...
You just think, offensive, defensive would have fit the mold of the team a little bit better?
Yeah, I think that with Bob and Dreger and net, they're so solid back there. And honestly, they're already letting up 3 goals a game anyway, 2 goals a game no matter what, just because they're not playing defense. So... I think you should really just play to your strengths and play high flying. We've seen it being a provenly worked method before.
Travis Dermott, by the way, was the name I was thinking of. He was the name.
I think also a really solid trade was that Colorado Avalanche trade, Devin Dubnyk. Even while Devin Dubnyk might not be a huge, a great pickup, a solid 2.9 goal against average something, they needed a backup in Colorado because they really only have Grubauer right now
and Pavel Francouz, but the problem is both of them got hurt in the playoffs last year.
And with the way that the NHL's handling everything with COVID, to get another goalie up that's not your Zamboni driver might be difficult in a last-minute situation. So getting Devin Dubnyk, a solid veteran guy who's been there before, and if they're going to the playoffs, which we know the Avalanche are going to go to the playoffs at this point.
I think they're 16 points up on the Coyotes or something like that.
Yeah, so if Grubauer and Francouz wind up getting hurt, or one of them gets hurt and they wind up needing to start, because if they go to a 7-game series, they're going to need to start a backup. And Devin Dubnyk is a veteran goalie who has some experience, and he's not that he's been there, done that before, but he's not going to crap his pants when he sees, Pietrangelo winding up from the high slot with the clapper.
Yeah, I mean, the Dubnyk trade to me, it's not a trade that moves the needle, but it is a smart trade because it's an insurance policy. Realistically speaking...
Well, they traded Greg Paterno, and a 5th round in 2021.
Which, I mean, to be honest with you, like, given the way that Dubnyk has played the last couple of years, I think Greg Paterno and a 5th is, like, pretty good value for him.
I don't think it's far off. I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely...
I think, like, just a straight-up 4th or, like, just a straight-up 5th for him would have been, like, even value. But you add Greg Paterno, who's, like, he's a veteran piece, but I think that this is a smart move from the Avalanche because they need that insurance policy, right? I don't know how the NHL is going to handle the playoffs this year because traditionally the NHL has never had back-to-backs in playoffs. They just don't do it. They had to last year because of the bubble and because they were trying to just rush through it. If there is back-to-backs in the playoffs this year, then yeah, you will need to start a backup at some point. And if either Grubauer or Francouz is hurt, you're going to want somebody who's a veteran, especially for a team like the Avalanche who, theoretically speaking, should be competing every single season.
And in a deep run like they should be making, they're going to need that backup.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, it depends on how the scheduling works, and it depends on... Because if Grubauer can stay healthy and there's no back-to-backs, then obviously Colorado's just going to run Grubauer the entire time. Like, they don't really need a reason to go to a back, unless he, like, starts to fall apart. But, like, traditionally in the playoffs, you just play your starter every single game. You hardly ever play your backup, unless like last year, we had the back-to-backs, which a lot of teams did utilize their backup in those situations. I think this is smart because... I think last year kind of opened their eyes that like Grubauer is injury prone. He's always been injury prone. Even going back to his days in Washington, he was always injury prone. And Francouz is injury prone. And you don't want to be in a position like last year where they were trying to win a Game 7 with Michael Hutchinson in that. Like, no offense to Michael Hutchinson, but obviously Colorado would have rather have had a goalie like Devin Dubnyk. So I think it's smart. I mean, realistically speaking, as long as Grubauer and Francouz are healthy, he's probably just going to sit on a taxi squad. But, I mean, it's not a bad option to have. I mean, we saw a similar situation with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They traded for David Rittich for a 3rd-round pick from the Calgary Flames. Now, this is a little bit different because currently Frederik Andersen is hurt, and he didn't travel with the team on the road trip. And Rittich actually played last night because Jack Campbell is also injury prone. I think he's had his fair share of his groin issues in the past. And this is Toronto saying, like, this to me, Toronto says two things. It says, A, that Anderson's injury is worse than we thought, and he's going to be out longer term. And B, Anderson might not even be back for the playoffs, so we might need David Rittich to back up Jack Campbell, which is concerning, I think. Just because obviously this indicates an issue with Anderson that we didn't previously know about. I do want to ask your opinion on the other trade Toronto made. They made a couple of trades, but this is the big one, obviously. They got Stefan Nason and Nick Foligno. This was a 3-team trade. So Columbus had to trade Nick Foligno to San Jose to retain half the salary. And then Columbus retained half the salary when they sent him to San Jose. And then San Jose retained half the salary when they sent him to Toronto. So Toronto essentially paid a 1st and 2 fourths for Nick Foligno and Stefan Nason. What are your thoughts on this one?
What is Columbus doing?
Well, that's a question at this point, right? Like, are they going to rebuild at this point?
Are they selling the franchise and just going to let Tortorella rebuild? Like, are they just giving him the reins as, like, the leader of this team? Is that what we're doing? I don't even know what's going on. You trade away Nick Foligno, your captain?
I mean, his contract was up, so maybe they were worried about not being able to re-sign him.
But... you took Toronto's pick, though. Like, I don't understand. It's not like you're taking these high-round picks. We spoke about how you might get a diamond in the rough, but unless they're rebuilding, which I don't know why they would be, like, starting this early into a rebuild, like, they already have a decent core of a team. They just need to find pieces, not not a high round first overall pick this upcoming year, and a fourth rounder in 2022. And I don't really know what San Jose's doing, but
Well, San Jose basically got paid a fourth round pick to take half his salary.
yeah, which isn't bad, I guess. But
Like, we actually saw a couple different trades, like the other trade to Tampa Bay with David Savard and Brian Lashoff. Like, the Detroit Red Wings got paid a fourth round pick
which
to
I
take some of
thought
their
was
salary.
really good for them, considering they've had a lot of injuries this year in Tampa.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the trade is just for the depth D. And I think, considering that they like to run 7D last year in the playoffs, that this is a good trade to have that depth defenseman. The Islanders made a similar trade for Braden Coburn because I think Lou Lamoriello realized, like, oh, if any of our top 6D get hurt, well, our backup options are Thomas Hickey and Sebastian Aho. So let's get a veteran in there. I think that this trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs is interesting. But does it really shift my perception of the team? No. So I like Nick Foligno on the Maple Leafs because he's a bit of a bigger body. But people are portraying him to be this, like, big, strong, like, hard checking, like, nose to the grindstone type player when, honestly, he's really not. I like Nick Foligno a lot, but to me, he's more of the faster and scoring oriented type of power forward. He's not an Anthony Mantha. He's not an Anders Lee, right? He's a little bit smaller. He's a little bit leaner. He's a little bit faster. And he's a little bit more oriented towards scoring goals than some of these other power forwards. So a lot of people are saying, like, oh, like, Nick Foligno is proving everyone wrong that, Kyle Dubas only wants scoring forwards. Well, like, Nick Foligno, he's kind of a scoring forward. Like,
He is a scoring forward. That's why Patrick Laine didn't keep his job.
he
wasn't on. He was getting outscored by that top line with Nick Foligno on it.
Like, Nick Foligno, if I pull up his thing here, his NHL page. Like, he's 6'2", so he's not small, but he's not like 6'3", like 240. He's not.
He's not a whale.
Like,
He's not Dan Boyle.
Like, I know I keep comparing people to Anders Lee, but Anders Lee is 6'3", 235. Like, there's a big difference between these two men. And it's not even the body difference, it's the way he plays. He doesn't play the way that everyone's making him out to be. To me, he's a prototypical Toronto Maple Leaf. Honestly, he's not that much different than Zach Hyman. In fact, I kind of like Zach Hyman in their top 6 a little bit better because Zach Hyman will go to the net and get his ass kicked, but he's going to stay in front of the net.
This really makes Toronto dangerous.
It definitely makes them dangerous offensively, for sure. And I think that this trade, along with the David Riddick trade, makes them my favorite to come out of that North Division.
This is going to be a very tough playoff team to beat because you have 4 people now on the ends of their careers looking for these cups.
Spezza, Thornton, Foligno.
JT.
Well, he's not at the end of his career. He's only like 29, 30.
No, but like he already wasted.
He's like lost so much that he's probably just like, goddamn.
He's already wasted the first half of his career, kind of, with the Islanders.
Well, I mean, he's only to this point, even since coming to Toronto, he hasn't won a playoff series.
That's what I'm saying. So he's wasted his career up to this point, essentially, especially for someone of his skill set, and for someone who went to a team thinking that they were going to do something, and then
the first 3 years has been first round exit, qualifying round exit.
Yeah, so like you have a lot of guys looking to finally nab one.
I think that this, to me, like I said, this to me makes the Toronto Maple Leafs my favorite to come out of the North Division because I think that if we look at the other teams in the playoff picture for the North Division, right? We have the Toronto Maple Leafs leading the division. We have the Montreal Canadiens, and honestly, so right now it's Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Montreal, and then Calgary has like an outside chance if one of these teams faltered to make the playoffs. But I'm going to just say Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Montreal. Toronto Montreal would be the first round matchup, and Montreal has kind of proven that hot start where they were the best team in the league is not who they are. They've fallen back down to earth. They're 18, 12, and 9, so essentially 18 and 21. They're just kind of an okay team all around, which is what we knew. They didn't make any moves this trade deadline to bolster the team. In fact, they waived Victor Mete. Now he's an Ottawa Senator. So, okay, I shouldn't say they made no moves. They acquired John Merrill, who's like a solid bottom six defenseman. But to me, that Toronto-Montreal matchup, Toronto's offense is just too much for Montreal to handle, even with playoff Carey Price. Toronto-Edmonton would be interesting because it's like whoever scores the last goal is going to win that series, basically.
Whoever scores the first goal might be the case with the goaltending.
And then Toronto-Winnipeg would actually be really interesting because Neil Pionk this year has shown that he's like really good at taking matchup. Like Neil Pionk is like Connor McDavid's kryptonite.
I said this when we were talking about the Norris Trophy. I said we need to put Neil Pionk in there. He's playing a fantastic season.
He, for some reason, they give him these hard matchups. Like, he's been shutting down Connor McDavid this year.
And I even said it earlier in the year when we talked about the players under 25 or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I said you need to put Neil Pionk in there. He's excellent. I think he's phenomenal.
So, that'd be a really interesting matchup because even though we don't think of Neil Pionk as, when they traded for him...
He's scoring, too. He scores, he gets assists. He's out of their big playoff matchup minutes. He's a solid defenseman.
When they traded for him for his offense, but, he's actually turned into one of the better matchup defensemen in the North Division. So, it'd be a really interesting series because, obviously, even with Freddie Anderson in that series, there's a huge, huge goaltending advantage to the Winnipeg Jets. And the Winnipeg Jets offense really, all things considered, not that much worse than the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their top six is still studded. So I think that would actually be a really interesting series. But this Nick Foligno trade to me makes Toronto my favorite to come out of the division. But does it change my perception of them going to have difficulties against certain teams, like big, heavy teams, like the Vegas Golden Knights or the St. Louis Blues or, hell, even the Islanders or the Bruins? I still think a team like Toronto would struggle against those guys. Because you have Jake Muzzin, you have Zach Bogosian, and you have Wayne Simmons, who are your checking type players, but
I think you're just gonna shove it down there. The problem is you need everyone to show up, but this is where what we're talking about, where that hunger and that veteran status is gonna kick in a little bit. Hopefully, you see them, because if this team comes out hungry in the playoffs, no one's stopping them. Your line combinate your top three lines. We're not even gonna say top two, top three lines are just shut down. Not shut down defensively, but they're just gonna. They should be able to suffocate you with offense, without a doubt. They should be able to pressure you into your half of the rink almost the whole time.
My question would then be, say for example, I'm just gonna use the Islanders because they're the team that I know best. They're the line matchups that I would know best off the top of my head. If the Maple Leafs played the Islanders, for argument's sake, let's assume that Pelech, Pollock, and the whole defensive core and the whole defensive structure is able to take away the top line of the Toronto Maple Leafs, which you're never going to completely take that line away because it's stacked, right? But let's say they're able to limit that. And then let's say you're able to limit the second line as well. Who on the Toronto Maple Leafs is going to limit the other team's best players? I think Jake Muzzin can take some of those matchup minutes, but are you going to try to match up Jake Muzzin and TJ Brody? Let's say they play the Capitals. Are you going to match Jake Muzzin and Brody against Ovechkin, Backstrom, and Tom Wilson?
I'm going to also make the comparison to, I think that this is a Chicago Blackhawks type team, though, from those super years. I think it's easily comparable, and I think, honestly, the defensive core is comparable, too.
I would actually say that I think that's the only point that's not comparable. I think the forwards are comparable, but a sixth pairing of Hjalmarsson and Seabrook is way different than the sixth pairing of Travis Dermott and Nick Patan. It's not the same, I don't think.
I think it is, though, because you're talking about an offensive defenseman anyway. So
yeah, but Nick Hjalmarsson. Yeah, but Nick Hjalmarsson was a defensive defenseman, and but Seabrook blocked a lot more shots than people gave him credit for, which is why his
he did
so
block. He did block a lot of shots, but he was an offensive defenseman. I'm just saying. I think because I also do think that the lines for Toronto are better than that Chicago Blackhawks line offensively.
Probably. I don't think they're as deep, but they're definitely like the top 6 is definitely better.
Yeah. So
I would say that for sure.
And so I would give them that, and I think that Frederick Anderson is better than
Crawford. Probably.
He's and Niemi.
The only thing that those Blackhawks teams had on the Leafs, which is the same thing that me and Steven, even you, have been arguing over and over again, is that fourth line. Andrew Shaw, Brian Bickle, and we figured out who it was. We forgot his name on the last podcast, but like the Leafs don't have a fourth line like that. They don't have a penalty killing fourth line. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's my main point is like the Blackhawks could have sent. The Blackhawks also had Jonathan Toews.
When you add Foligno to the team,
but he's not a shutdown player, is what I'm saying.
No, but you're adding more suffocation. Is the point? Is what I'm saying though, and I think that he's a good defensive player. He might not be shut down, but he is big. He does get in he does make good plays along the boards.
I think he's all right.
So I really just think you're just gonna suffocate every team that you play against with them, or you should, in theory, because Frederick Anderson. So the way I see it is the offensive is good enough to if it's in the offensive zone, it shouldn't be leaving the offensive zone. It should be You should be suffocating them, and so when it does leave there. It should be either a dump or a 2-on-1 for your defenseman with Frederick Anderson in that. Frederick Anderson is solid. Like, he might not be the best goalie in the world, but
I think he's a top 10.
Exactly.
Given the defense
he should be stopping. He should be stopping any shot that should be coming from the outside. So it comes down the outside. They take the shot, and then it cycles back out. I think that it should really just be a simple suffocation game for them. But we'll have to wait and see. The past 3 years didn't really work out.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
but I do think that adding Foligno in there might make a big difference.
I think like on paper they're one of the better teams in the league. It's just that every year in the playoffs we see the same thing over and over again. You know. Like actually, I think last year's playoffs is kind of a good example of what I'm talking about, where Jones and Werenski were able to shut down the top 6 of the Maple Leafs, and the Maple Leafs had no answer for the top 6 of the Columbus Blue Jackets.
We also watched Jones play over 60 minutes last year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if the Maple Leafs match up against somebody like that, like...
I also think, though, you also ran into Tortorella's shutdown or anti-suffocation offense because they run dump and chase, which is exactly what you want to happen in a suffocation offense. But the issue is... they're just too good at it. They're too good at just getting it out and just playing neutral zone.
I think that this Leafs team can definitely beat certain teams, but I don't think it would beat others. Like, I think they would have a good shot at beating the Colorado Avalanche. I think they would have a good shot at beating, like, the Minnesota Wild or the Vegas Golden Knights. But I can't see them beating a team like...
I see them...
like the Tampa Bay Lightning, honestly.
I also see them beating Edmonton.
I think so, just because they have such a huge advantage in net. It's not even funny. Like, all 3 of their goalies, like Riddick, Campbell, and Anderson, are all better than Smith and Koskinen. It's not even like a question.
Yeah. So even if the game turns out to be a shootout of like JT and Mitch versus Leon and Connor, like I still have my money on Matthew. So
yeah, and like I said. I do think that the Leafs are going to end up coming out of this division because the first 2 rounds of the playoffs are within division, and then the final is they have to reseed based on points. I don't know. I really, outside of John Tavares, because like he can go fuck himself, I really do want to see this Toronto Maple Leafs team succeed because I think watching Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner in the playoffs is an absolute treat. I mean, they're 2 of the best players in the league, and I actually really like both of them as people. And I really would. Honestly, I would love to see Joe Thornton win a cup. I would love to see Jason Spezza win a Stanley Cup. That'd be great. I just wish that there would have been a more concentrated effort to say, okay, we have enough scoring in the top 6. Let's get some role players down in the bottom 6. And instead, they're going to just run with like this high-flying like offense that hasn't worked in the last 3 years in the playoffs. They're kind of like saying like, well, let's do the same thing we were doing, but better. And it's like, but it hasn't worked. I don't know. I could be eating my words, and quite honestly, would it surprise me to see the Toronto Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup? No, absolutely not. Like, if the Toronto Maple Leafs go on this run and they win the Stanley Cup this year, would not surprise me at all. I don't want people to sit here and think that I'm saying the Maple Leafs are a bad team. They're not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. They're one of the best teams in the league. I think they're super unbalanced. They're a super glass cannon, and I don't like their chances against teams like Tampa Bay, who, realistically speaking, might be the team they have to go through. So it's going to be interesting. Definitely a team to keep an eye on, though.
I think a really interesting trade, because I don't know what the franchise is doing with this trade, was that Jeff Carter trade to LA, or from LA to Pittsburgh.
It's interesting, right? He goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
They didn't really get much for they didn't get much for him, or Pittsburgh didn't trade that much away for him. They didn't give up that much. They gave a third in 2022 and a fourth in 2023. Conditional, the third pick in 2022 becomes a second if Pitt reaches the
Stanley Cup
Finals, and Carter plays in 50% of the games. And the fourth round in 2023 becomes a third if Carter plays in 50-plus games in 2021 to 2022. Really not that bad. First off, I think it's fair to say that if Jeff Carter will probably wind up playing 50-plus games in 2021, 2022, if it's an 82-game season.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a relatively healthy person throughout his career.
And if 50%, if they make the finals, he's playing in 50% of the games. Like,
well, yeah, you're not gonna trade for Jeff Carter and then reach the finals and like bench him.
Yeah, like, you know what? I really don't want to give them that third conditional to a second. I'd rather lose the finals. Like, I'm not sure that's what's gonna happen. So, but I don't think Pittsburgh is a Stanley Cup competing team. I think that they're maybe an early wild card, second round exit. I don't see them having the depth on their team besides Sid and Malkin. But, like, what do they really have? They have John Marino on defense. They've got
P.O. Joseph. They've got Letang.
They've got Rust.
Well, they've had some guys that are like definitely underperforming. Like Gensel's kind of been just okay.
I'm just saying, and like
Russ has been in and out of the lineup.
Their goaltending isn't all too that great right now.
It's also not playoff tested.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know why you're trading for Jeff Carter, who's a veteran piece that's probably looking, I would think, to compete again.
Yeah.
I don't know why he obviously probably had no say in it, but I don't know why. I'm just not sure what they were thinking. LA also, I don't know what they were thinking. LA's, I think, is on a cup contending season this year, or a playoff run season this year at least. They're working they're not far off. They're, I think, like 4 points behind or 8 points behind the Coyotes, but I don't think that they're that far off. They
are currently 6 points out of the playoffs with even games played with the Blues.
Okay. So I'm just not sure that they were necessarily out of the contention that they should have been trading him.
I like this trade for both teams. I mean, let's be honest here. I know that you're really, really high on the LA Kings this year. But are they going to compete for a Stanley Cup this year? I don't think they have any chance.
I'm just a firm believer that you need to commit past a certain point. Kind of like in our fantasy league.
I don't know if his actual...
Which, by the way, update to everyone, our fantasy league is in the playoffs right now.
I'm on a bye this week.
Yeah, he's on a bye this week. So is Leeds. We've got me versus Joe Schmo and Speeb versus Chris. Some tough matchups. The app isn't updated right this minute, so I can't tell you the scores. They're close games, but
he's not on an expiring contract. His contract reaches next year, so
maybe I guess if they presumed that he wasn't going to resign.
So here's the thing. I really like this trade for both teams in terms of, like, I think that LA is opening the door for the young guys with this trade. Because now what you can do is next year you can play Anze Kopitar on the first line and you can put Quentin Byfield on the second line. Like this opens up that spot. I don't think the LA Kings are a Stanley Cup contending team. And quite honestly, with the amount of work that I think it would be, this is the smart way for the team to go. Because to your point, if they really wanted to, they probably could wait a year or two and then compete again, but only for like another year or two because Kopitar is going to be like 35, 36.
That's what I'm saying. So like this is, if you're competing, it should be this season. This is a very good season for them to be going for, especially since you are only 6 points out. You've already committed to this much to the season. You're not going to get that high of a draft pick in a not very good draft. So what's the worst that could happen? You get a 16th overall pick instead of the 14th?
Well, these picks are for next year.
No, I'm saying if they lose, let's say they make the Stanley Cup, let's say they make the playoffs and lose in the first round. It wasn't worth it then because they didn't make it. They didn't win. So keeping him wasn't worth it if he walks. But like in terms of draft picks, like what's the difference? You get a 16th over a 14th? There is no difference there. You might as well fully commit to the fact that you've already earned this many points for the season. You need to commit to winning.
I kind of disagree in the sense that I think the LA Kings are looking at it from this perspective where they're saying we're not going to win a cup this year. We're probably not even going to make the playoffs, honestly, because a lot of these points that they have in the bank are from the beginning of the season when they were leading that division, and they've actually been like kind of bad since then. And I think that they're looking at it, and I think this to me actually is an indication that LA is saying, this is the white flag. This is the rebuild. We're going to commit to it now.
If that's what they're doing, then I don't mind it.
But they have to like fully commit to the rebuild. And, I think that this is also like a favor maybe to Jeff Carter because he does have another year. So maybe this was a favor to him and like maybe he wanted out. I think that this also opens the door for Quentin Byfield. And for the Pittsburgh Penguins, I kind of agree. I don't think that they're a Stanley Cup contending team. I don't like their chances to get out of the division because I think that they could beat the Islanders because they actually, I know regular season doesn't mean anything in the playoffs at all. But
you know what's funny? It's actually funny to say that I don't think they could beat the Islanders.
I
could see them beating someone like the Rangers, though, if the Rangers happen to make it. Or I could see them beating someone. I don't think they could beat the Capitals, but
they could probably beat the Rangers, the Bruins, or the Flyers.
And I think for the simple fact that Sid could beat any of those teams.
Yeah, well, you can't bet against Crosby ever.
And
as long as he's on the ice, like
that's what I'm saying. Because I think those teams, it'll come down to 1-goal games, and I'm not betting against Sid in a 1-goal game ever. I expect him to have the 1-goal lead, if nothing else.
I do like this trade for the Penguins in the sense that it gives them a really deep center core now.
I agree with that.
Because Jeff Carter on the third line, and it gives them a little bit of balance, too, because Carter is a decent two-way forward. Like, he can play shutdown if you need him to. He's no Mike Richards in his prime. He's not Anze Kopitar, but if you need him to, he can play some shutdown D. And
special teams also.
Yeah, he can kill the penalties for you. He's depth down the middle, and
he's good at faceoffs also. So a
low
second
key,
line.
like if Malkin keeps shitting his pants like he is, you can throw Malkin on the third line. So
Malkin's also injured, so
yeah, and it's like insurance. But like if Malkin comes back and he was playing like he was in the beginning of the season, you could be like, all right, listen, Malkin, like
go on the third line.
Yeah,
with Jeff
like,
Carter.
get out of here. Like,
although what's funny, Malkin doesn't really shift lines.
Yeah, for some reason he's just like
I've
totally
seen
immune.
Sid shift lines. I don't see Malkin like ever really moving around.
Which is funny because if anybody, I think Sid shifts lines because he's just so good. That,
I think
they use him to get other players off of slumps.
I also think Sid is kind of like a Tom Brady on this team, where what he says when he's in the pocket goes. If he looks to the offensive coordinator or the coach in the face and says, "I'm going out next shift,"
like, yeah, you're not going to tell Sidney Crosby no.
You might not tell him no.
I think they use Sid to shift lines, and this actually might give us a little bit of insight into the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think they use Sid when they shift lines to like get players off of slumps, because like they'll just have Crosby go spoon feed somebody a couple goals, but they know that Malkin's not going to do that.
True.
I don't know. I like this trade for the Penguins because this to me shows this is a very strong indicator for these two teams. One, this indicates to me the LA Kings are saying, "Yep, it's over. It's time to commit to the rebuild." And this also says to me the Pittsburgh Penguins are saying, "Listen, as long as Sidney Crosby is on this roster, we're going for it every year." And you know what? It might be misguided, but I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless. You know, you're not going to waste Sidney Crosby. You're just going to be like, "Listen, like, we're going for it every year, and I don't care what it's going to cost us." Like, this rebuild for the Penguins is going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah, but I don't think. What else do we have on this?
And we could probably like talk about like one or two more trades. I think one of the interesting ones is we could talk about either the Bennett trade or the Kulikov trade. Those are like the other ones that I consider like the big ones. Like, obviously we have other ones like the Patrick Nemeth trade to Colorado is good for the depth defenseman. You know, Tampa Bay gets their depth defenseman.
Getting rid of Riley Nash was good for them. Getting
just for like cap space purposes, yeah.
Exactly.
Let's talk about. I guess we'll just talk about these two because and we'll wrap it up like that. Do you think the Edmonton Oilers did enough to address the defenses in this trade deadline? Like, do you think Kulikov's good enough, or?
I think he's good enough for this year. I don't know if this is like a franchise defensive changing pick. I don't know if I would say now, "Oh, I'm confident that the Oilers have a great defensive core," because
they kind of don't.
Yeah, no. Like, Nurse took a big step forward this year. He played great, but
I mean, I like Darnell Nurse. Like, specifically in the defensive zone. I like Darnell Nurse a lot. I think Ethan Bear is rounding out his game, but he's not quite there yet. But his talents are better suited for the offensive zone. And then you have, like, Adam Larson, who's, like, a shot-blocking machine. But I think I would have liked to have seen the Edmonton Oilers pursue maybe one more defenseman. Maybe get Kulikov and somebody like Brandon Montour, or freaking Greg Pattern was on the trade block apparently. Go out and get him, you know. Like, this doesn't shift the needle for me for what I think the Oilers are, which is a glass cannon. Can the Oilers win a playoff series? Hell yeah, they can. Could the Oilers maybe even come out of this division? I mean, yeah, the division's kind of not good. So, like, if the Oilers can stay away from those tough defensive matchups like the Jets and the Canadiens, like, if it came down to Oilers-Leafs, like I said earlier, honestly, I couldn't tell you who's going to win that series because it's whoever's going to score the last goal. Like, it's either going to be Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid scoring, like, in a 7-6 hockey game. So, I could see the Oilers coming out of this division, but do I think the Oilers are a Stanley Cup contender? Not a chance. Because when the going gets tough and the tough get going and you're in the trenches in a 2-1 hockey game, do I trust Mike Smith in a 2-1 hockey game? Absolutely not. Do I trust Mikko Koskinen in a 2-1 hockey game? Not as far as I can throw him.
Like, how far could you really throw him?
Probably not very far. Mikko Koskinen's a big dude. He's like 6'6". But, like, I don't know. And I'm not... obviously, the goaltending is an issue, and you're not going to upgrade goaltending severely at the trade deadline because it doesn't really happen. The last time we saw it happen was Ryan Miller, but... Like, if I told you right now that the Edmonton Oilers had to play a 7-game series against, let's pick a good defensive team in the NHL, like the Boston Bruins, like, no, I don't like those odds.
No.
If the Edmonton Oilers have to go out and play the Tampa Bay Lightning, I really don't like those odds because the Lightning can score as much as they can, and the Lightning can also defend because who do they have in the back end? Oh, just a little guy named Victor Hedman. Like, who's in net? Oh, I don't know, some guy that I've never heard of called Andrei Vasilevsky. Like, this does not move the needle for me, but I do like the pick. I do like the pickup from them. I do like the trade for a defensive stay-at-home defenseman. So I do like this trade from the Oilers. And I guess we'll finish off with the Sam Bennett trade because this was kind of a big one. So Sam Bennett goes to the Florida Panthers, and along with a 6th for a 2nd-round pick and Emil Heineman. Heineman. What are we doing with the Flames? Are they done? Are they rebuilding? Where do we, like, if you had to fix the Flames, like, where do you go from here is the big question. Because you traded away David Riddick. Like, you still have Jacob Markstrom, who's obviously one of the best goalies in the league. You still have a lot of your core pieces, but you just lost Sam Bennett because the coach didn't like him. But the coach is, like, literally only been coaching there for a month. So, like, do we like what the Flames are doing? Do we not like what the Flames are doing? Like, I don't
know how to feel about the Flames because the Flames just fucking suck this year, which is
disappointing. Because they were my, like, at the beginning of the year when we were picking, like, way too early, going to be totally irrelevant Stanley Cup matchups. Like I said, the Flames are going to make the Stanley Cup Finals, and, like, look how well that panned out. I said the Flames are going to win this division. That hasn't really worked.
They just, like, nothing worked out for them. None of their key players popped off. We didn't really see Johnny Hockey do all too much. Like, it was tough.
It's been a rough year for the Flames, and I don't like this trade because this feels very much like a media-driven trade to me, where the media started getting on Sam Bennett, and so the Flames organization started getting on Sam Bennett. The coach started getting on Sam Bennett, and then he was scratched in and out of the lineup. I don't know what they're expecting out of Sam Bennett. Like, he's not a 30-goal scorer. He's not going to put you up 60 points. He's a third-line, pain-in-the-ass, nuisance-type player. He's very much a Brad Marchand if Brad Marchand couldn't put up 100 points. Like, can we not just appreciate Sam Bennett for what he is? Like, do we have to expect him to score 45 goals every year? I don't know. I really like this pickup for the Panthers because this is the type of player that wins you playoff series, right? That bite, that snarl. He's going to goad your opponents into penalties. He's going to make people take liberties with him. He's going to take the attention away from the big players because he's going to piss everyone off. This is very much a playoff type player, and he excels in the playoffs. So I love this trade for the Panthers. I hate the fact that he basically got driven out of Calgary by the media. Very disappointing. So I don't know. Not a huge fan of this one, to be honest with you. But,
well, like, I think it was good for Florida, though. I like to see that pickup for Florida.
Yeah, it's a great pickup for Florida.
And, yeah, it's a tough one to say because Calgary really just did nothing this year. Like, they...
Yeah. So
just flopped hard.
We'll end with 3 questions. One, who do you think, if there was a winner to this trade deadline, who do you think did the best?
Probably the Islanders.
I would have to say either the Islanders or the Florida Panthers. Those are probably my 2 picks for who did the best. Who do you think is going to have, like, the biggest impact on their new team? Like, maybe not necessarily win them a Stanley Cup, but, like, just the biggest impact. And I honestly think you can make a very strong argument for Sam Bennett having the biggest impact on the Florida Panthers.
I actually think it might be Jeff Carter on that Penguins team.
That's another really good one. And we'll leave it off with this. Post-trade deadline, who's your Stanley Cup favorite?
Oh, boy.
Given that we now know the teams have all the players that they're going to have.
I'm going to go with the Avalanche just because I think that they really are just probably like the best team in the league.
My post-trade deadline Stanley Cup favorite.
Actually, no. I'm gonna go with the Maple Leafs. I think that the Nick Foligno trade was enough to push them over. But I don't know if they could beat the Avalanche in a game. So I would actually say the Avalanche.
You're going to stick with Colorado?
I would say Avalanche and Toronto would be my two, and then I think the Avalanche would win in the end.
My post-trade deadline Stanley Cup favorite, I'm going to stick with Tampa Bay. I'm going to say that they're still a fantastic team. They have a healthier lineup this year.
They did lose Stamkos as of recently.
Yeah, but they didn't need him last year, so.
True. Bro, how dare you? He went out and scored that. He nipped that one.
And that's no disrespect to Steven Stamkos.
Just going out there and nipping that one. Like, that's so careless. That's like us going out to the barn on the side of my house and just, like, ripping one and being like, all right, time to go back in.
That's gonna be in a movie one day, by the way. That scene is gonna be in a movie, I'm telling you. But then that's no disrespect to Steven Stamkos because I love the guy and
But like, come on.
I'm so like disappointed that he's just like as banged up as he is. But I'm gonna stick with Tampa Bay because I mean they're just a really good team. They're to me what Toronto should be, I think. And I just really like the Tampa Bay Lightning. And my honorable mention, I'm not going to say the Islanders because I'm not going to jinx it. I'm not doing that to myself. My honorable mention for Stanley Cup favorite, I'm going to go with Colorado. I really do like the Colorado Avalanche.
I think the Islanders are a good pick, but I just don't see the Islanders beating certain teams is why I say no.
I'm just not doing it to myself. I'm not doing it.
That's fair. Yo, we know he's never going to do it, but like what if Speeb actually got that mullet? So, for everyone who doesn't know, there's a bet between two of the goobers on this show, Rob and Speeb, that when the other person's team wins the Stanley Cup.
It was if either the Rangers or the Islanders win the Stanley Cup, you're going to get mullets.
Oh, okay. Well,
we got real close in 2014.
I've already said if Patrick Kane gets that Hart Trophy again, I'll redo it. But
we got real close in 2014. That was kind of scary.
Yeah, so Rob would definitely get the mullet. I'm not sure if Speed would do it because he loves his hair too much, but
I would get it if we're still working from home. If I'm working in the office,
nah, bro, you have to get it no matter what.
I don't know. I don't know if it's worth my job.
What do you mean your job? I actually don't even think the mullet would be bad on you though, because the way you tuck your hair right now.
Listen, if the Islanders win a Stanley Cup, all bets are. I'll do whatever. Honestly,
that's what I'm saying. Like
if I get to witness my team win the Stanley Cup, like all bets are off as far as what happens.
So he just said he's getting the mullet if they win the cup. We have it on voice recording now.
As long as it wouldn't cost me my employment.
Why would it cost you your employment? It's a haircut. It's not even a bad one. A lot of people get mullets just for the look of it.
Yeah, but I work for kind of a strict company, if you know what I'm saying. So,
I think you'll be fine.
Just
don't get the chop lines in it, the racing lines in it, like I did.
But yeah, so you heard it here, folks. Colorado Avalanche. Me and Tim are both
2021.
Pretty high on them.
Forever.
Listen, I would love to see Nathan McKinnon win the Stanley Cup, and there's nobody that I dislike on a Colorado
I would actually
Avalanche,
rather see Landeskog. Not that it matters, but I'd like to see Landeskog win one.
So yeah, next week, 3/4 mark podcast. I think we're just gonna kind of go over,
kind of what we just talked about these last 5 minutes, but more in depth.
What happened?
Kind of what we talked about these last 5 minutes with our Stanley Cup picks, but more in depth.
Yeah, like where we're at with certain teams, and we will be talking more about like the non-contending teams, about like what does this season mean to them? What do they do going forward, stuff like that. So, yeah, stay tuned for that, and I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.
Forever.